then we'll start. We hope that Zerlinda and I will give you some valuable input that you guys can use in your schemes and as managing agents. We try our best. Zerlinda wanted me to tell you guys, and maybe it's the appropriate time now to say it. But we have been starting to use AI, and AI has assisted us with some of the ideas in respect of this webinar. So we've been building an AI bot, and we've been feeding it with all the sectional title information, all the different textbooks, legislation, and so forth. And we're in the final throes of being able to launch that on our website. So one will then be able to actually go and ask some questions on the website, and the bot will be able to hopefully correctly answer you, but also give some general advice. But one must always remember it's AI, it's not a person, and one should always just check that. But it's amazing to see what is happening with AI and what can be done with that.
Well, Willie, if you and your team don't stop giving everybody such comprehensive, proper, free advice, then the people like me are going to have to retire early, because you give so much away already, and now you're making it even smarter. So, yeah, I don't know whether I should say thank you or be angry with you.
And unfortunately, for AI, they can't actually do the work. They can give you an answer or so forth, but somebody actually has to do the work.
True.
So
And take
at
the
the end of the
responsibility.
day, absolutely. So at the end of the day, I mean, it just gives you a start, but somebody does have to, at the end, still do the work. And I don't think we're going to get to the point where pleadings and documents are drawn by AI and so forth. We're not there yet. I think we're still quite a while away from that. But it does make it much easier to actually go through volumes of, or large volumes of work, and to give you some insight into things that as a human will take you very long to actually pick up. So there are some advantages to it. Right. Okay, so Lauren, are you going to start?
Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our webinar this morning. Our topic for the day is how to address unforeseen body corporate expenses. And we're joined by Zerlinda Van Der Merwe from TVDM Consultants and Willie Roos from Stratafin. I'm just going to do a quick introduction. Willie Roos, for those who don't know him yet. Willie Roos is the founder and CEO of Stratafin. He holds BCom and BProc degrees from the University of Johannesburg. He practiced as an attorney and conveyancer until 2008, whereafter he became involved in sectional title management. During his time as the principal of a managing agency and dealing with the financial difficulties and woes of many schemes, Willie became interested in community schemes financing and started working on the business and actuarial model on which Stratafin is built. In 2012, Willie, together with his business partner, started raising the capital necessary to operate a funding business in the community scheme space. And in 2014, they launched Stratafin. Today, Stratafin has assisted hundreds of schemes throughout South Africa and have placed funding exceeding 300 million into the hands of schemes. Stratafin set out to change the way schemes are assisted during times of financial crisis, and they were the first company that provided finance to schemes without the obligation of the scheme to repay the finance received and without catching them in the debt trap. I'm going to just move on to, Zerlinda. Zerlinda graduated from the University of Stellenbosch with her BA, LLB, LLM cum laude degrees. While completing her LLM thesis, specifically focused on the constitutionality of sectional title rules. After graduating, Zerlinda joined Pam Golding Property Management Services as a managing agent. Following this practical experience, Zerlinda completed her articles with Marina Costas at BBM Attorneys, followed by her appointment as a specialist community schemes consultant with Professor Graham Paddock at Paddocks. before she co-founded TVDM Consultants. Zerlinda went back to her roots as General Manager of PGPMS. Thank you and enjoy the webinar.
Mouthful, hey?
I
Thank you
stopped
so
that.
much. I thought so. I thought
Is
so.
it enough? Enough.
One day we're just going to go, ta-da, it's us. Thank you, Willie. Thank you, Lauren, for hosting today's webinar and for inviting me. I really appreciate it. I see you've got a fantastic number of participants, and I hope that they're going to be quite vocal on the chat and the Q&A and things like that. When you invited us to join you for the webinar, we were asked to give a couple of ideas of topics. And one that was quite hot at that particular point in time in our consulting department was when trustees and managing agents alike approach us to ask questions about, how do we fund, how do we deal with, how do we become transparent, how do we communicate with our members when something happens that we could not budget for, that we could not plan for, or even something that we should have budgeted or planned for and did not for whatever reason. What are we supposed to do? Are we supposed to go to the members with our hat in hands and apologize? Are we supposed to raise a special levy? Are we supposed to, decide which debtor to pay and which not to pay and whatever it might be? And, I thought that would be a really great topic for this particular point in time in community schemes. And of course, more importantly, for Stratafin and everything that you do for community schemes as well. And when we got started this morning, we spoke about a specific scenario that a managing agent client had raised with me fairly recently. Do you want me to jump in?
Yeah, you can go ahead.
Okay, perfect.
Yeah.
So without, giving names away and all of those fun things, it's a body corporate in your neck of the woods, Willie, that has a water supply, but has multiple meters. And apparently the city of Joburg, and I know that the city of Joburg is at times not the best, and I think my lucky stars to be living in Cape Town and not Joburg at times. They did not bill the body corporate, and the body corporate was none the wiser. And they simply did not account for a massive bill at the end of the day, should a massive bill approach them. And when delving in the accounts and all of those fun things, it became sorry about that. It became apparent that there was another meter that had obviously been consuming a supply, and the body corporate had a nice healthy surplus. And because of this nice healthy surplus, they decided not to raise levy increases for a couple of years, which we never ever recommend. At least we don't. And I'll be keen to hear what you say about that, Willie. But they were planning on using the surplus for other things in the scheme. And now the trustees have got this decision about whether or not to actively pursue the city of Joburg to find out what their debt to them is, alternatively to simply, use the surplus for payment, alternatively to ignore, ostrich head in sand type of mentality, use the surplus for the things that they have planned to use it for, and then just wait for this bill to be presented to the body corporate. I mean, this would have most certainly been something that is unforeseen. It was something that was not budgeted for, arguably should have been budgeted for had they have known or been aware, and what surplus funds or reserve funds can be used for. And I see the first topic is establishing an emergency fund, and I suppose that's where it comes in. Hey, this is an emergency.
Yeah, so the example that you've used, we've seen many. Hein at Confiance, that does all the municipal work for Stratafin and the schemes that we assist. Actually, has also seen on many occasions where you have had an estimate that was built. So more or less the same situation that you have where there were estimates built for years, 2-3 years, and then suddenly they go and read the meter, and then suddenly there's this unforeseen huge amount of money that needs to be paid. And nobody has picked up over that period of time that they were just estimating, and they were not giving proper readings. So yeah, that is definitely a real problem that you have. The ostrich mentality is definitely not the one to be followed. And I would not recommend that trustees go and do that. I think as part of their fiduciary duty, they should actually go and make sure that the bills are correct, but they must also, as soon as they realize that there's a problem, they start to need work need to work to sort it out. So I think that surplus, that healthy surplus that you were talking about in your administrative budget is always good. It's always good to have that bit of a buffer that that sits there, and to make sure that you get that, and you do that by making sure that you're collecting your contributions, your levies, because we also see lots of schemes that have huge amounts of outstanding debtors, and then they also don't have the cash flow when this sudden unexpected event arises that they now suddenly must pay. Then they don't have money because they sit with huge amounts of debtors, and people are not paying levies. So collections again is such an integral part of being a trustee, and making sure that you get your money, and that you do have money, so that if these things happen, that you do have money. So I don't know if there's anything else that you want to add on that.
So I remember when the legislation changed, I mean, we all do, it was a hell of a thing for our industry and owners and trustees and managing agents alike, that this concept of a maintenance, repair and replacement plan and the reserve fund, came as a shock to many. But, as you pointed out in your notes here, the requirement to create a reserve in the administrative fund, it was always a requirement under the Sectional Titles Act to have a reasonable provision for future maintenance, repair and replacement, and unforeseen or contingency expenses, or whatever you wanted to call it. So there was always a need to have this additional savings. Many body corporates have the argument of, we're not a business, we're not here to make a profit and all those fun things. But and I know you're going to be talking about the zero-based budget a little bit later on, but you have to ensure that there is a savings for everything that is unknown, because you can't simply raise a special levy if something crops up. A special levy is only for the unforeseen emergency events, things that have not been included in the budget. You can't fund your budget through a special levy or not raise a levy increase. Everything in life goes up. There is bound to be some expenses of the body corporate that needs to be increased. It's never our recommendation to not have a levy increase, or to have a levy holiday, or to reduce levies, or anything along those lines. And the savings in the maintenance, repair and replacement plan in the reserve fund is only for the common property that is existing there that needs to be maintained and replaced. So the bill from the city of Joburg, or the roof that blows off, or some emergency event that comes up, there still needs to be a savings for it. So I always like to tell my clients that, in my opinion, there should be 4 separate bank accounts. So your admin fund, your reserve fund, your savings for the reserve fund, and your savings for the admin fund. And your savings always need to be, protected. It needs to be maintained. It needs to be with a high interest rate, maybe a little bit less accessible than your day-to-day accounts. So very, very important to ensure that there is an additional fund. And whether or not it should just be for emergencies is debatable. There's a lot of things that come up that don't fit within the administrative fund budget or the reserve fund budget. And that's where those additional surplus funds most certainly come in very useful.
Just one thing, or maybe there are 2 things that I want to raise still here under this. Your maintenance reserve fund budget, what we also see being included in the market that is happening is that people want to make improvements, and then they just include that into the maintenance reserve and budget fund, and then they don't get the required participation from owners to actually agree to that, and then they just start spending the money. And then if an owner asks the question, then they say, but it was included in the maintenance reserve and budget fund. So not the right way to do it, not the open and transparent way of doing things, and one should not follow that methodology. So that is the one aspect that I want to touch on. The second one is, people are always saying, but what percentage of your administrative budget must you put into your maintenance reserve? And we still get that question so often, of people don't understanding that you have your 10-year plan, and you have to budget to make sure that you can fulfill that plan as and when it occurs in the plan. So there is no percentage. You need to maintain your scheme, and you need to have sufficient money to maintain the scheme properly. And people don't always get that. They think that you must put a 10% or a 20% or a 25% or whatever into that, and just keep that there. And that's also a problem that we see.
we get the question of what is the minimum that we have to put in? Like,
Yeah.
what is the bare minimum that we need to? Well, Nicole posted on the Q&A, and it's also a question that we get often, is what happens when a body corporate has an approved maintenance, repair and replacement plan, as it should, but an item within that plan suddenly needs repair or replacement, too early. So in other words, it's not as per the maintenance, repair and replacement plan. The body corporate might not have sufficient funds in the reserve fund. What then? Do we simply say, oh, no, wait, this is contrary to the plan, we have to wait for X amount of time? Where do you get that funds from? You can't just run back to the owners and raise special levies the whole time. It needs to come from somewhere.
Absolutely. Yeah, so that's the first aspect. Then risk assessment. When you and I had a chat about this and we were preparing to talk about this, I was telling you about the specific scheme that's under administration, where the scheme had a sudden flood in December the year before last. And that sudden flood created chaos. All the water, there's no flower beds and places for the water to really run off. And it just ran down the driveways right to the bottom of the scheme, and it flooded all the bottom units in that scheme to the tune of about 500,000, between 500 and 600,000 rands worth of damages that just suddenly occurred. So in this instance, the scheme was very lucky that the insurer actually said we will pay it. So the damages were paid by them. However, they made it very clear that they would not look at that again and that they won't pay it, because now the trustees or the administrator has been aware of this problem and they know about this risk. So we had to then, from Confiance's point of view, go and assess that risk. What is the situation? What can we do? How can we divert water? Where can we take the water apart from just the way that it is running? Can it be rerouted in other ways? So lots of stuff had to be done. We got NABA engineers in, and Philip and his team actually designed a whole new stormwater system, different runoffs, different pits where the water were collected and so forth, to make sure that this doesn't happen again. But if the scheme was not in a situation where the insurer paid out, then they would have had this 500,000 rands worth of damages, and that had to come from somewhere because they had to replace it. Also had a conversation with a lady in Durban the other day of a unit in a scheme that is burnt down, and the insurance repudiated that claim. In respect of, and they were single standing units, and that one was burnt down, and the insurance repudiated the claim for some other reason, and now the body corporate actually has the obligation to replace this. So here we have the sudden emergency of a section that is no longer there. The owner is entitled to go. Lauren, just go back. So the scheme has to then now fund that, and the money must come from somewhere. So it's important to do this risk assessment, go through the complex, make sure that you know what your risks are. One of the things that they don't budget for, and which is a risk on schemes, is that they don't have legal fees. We see very few schemes budget for legal fees, and the answer is no, but we put it onto the owner's account. Yeah. So I was in a meeting that you guys asked me to attend, Zerlinda, the other night, and that was the answer that was given at that meeting. That is what we do.
Yep, amongst all the other wrong information that was given, yeah.
So that was the answer that was given.
Yeah.
So yeah, so I think these are things that I've also said on many webinars, is budget also for your cash flow. Make sure that you have sufficient cash flow. Don't just say this is the income, but you know that 40% of your owners in your scheme are not paying. Then you need to make sure that you actually budget for that cash flow, that you do have sufficient money. Make sure you've got those legal fees. Go and check out those other risks. Make sure, walk through the complex, and ensure.
The risk assessment thing, we don't expect the trustees to all be experts and walk around and actually identify problems. I mean, when I walk around the schemes that I'm involved in, some things pop out at me, but I'm no waterproofing expert and structural engineer expert and all those fun things. So I always recommend that an expert company, and you mentioned NABA, for example, that there's a few, not many, but few, experts in the industry that do these maintenance, repair, and replacement plans. They do the updates. It's also important to note that the maintenance, repair, and replacement plan has to be updated on an annual basis. But even though it gets updated at a particular point in time, let's say preparation for the annual general meeting, the Act has made provision that it can be approved at a special general meeting. And what does that tell you? That means that it is a constantly working document or a constantly in progress document. And that's because these well-timed risk assessment or site visits or whatever you want to call them has to take place. And this very often doesn't happen in a scheme that is managed in a conventional manner, either self-administered or with a managing agent. I mean, we know with our colleagues that are executive managing agents, that is a statutory requirement and a contractual agreement with the body corporate that they will go out on site and take the experts and all of those fun things. But it's incredibly important to know exactly what's going on in the scheme. And we often go to meetings where trustees ask, or members rather ask, oh, they want somebody on site. They want a trustee that's in the country. They want a trustee that lives there. We very often give the legal answer of, oh, it's not a legal requirement, but practically we need to have people on site if we don't have a building manager or a managing agent that offers that type of service or whatever it might be. There was a question on the chat, and I see that there's quite a bit of conversation happening on the chat and the Q&A box. But the question is, but what about that minimum requirement or minimum statutory requirement for the reserve fund? The intention is not to meet the minimum. The intention is to budget for what your maintenance, repair, and replacement plan tells you, provided that it's more than the minimum. So the minimum is not what we didn't go to school and say, I need 50% to pass. It was, let's see if I can.
30%.
30%, sorry. Let's not show our age now, Willie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, so absolutely right. If I remember correctly, that period for the minimum is actually passed. I think we long past that.
Yes.
So
yes.
a scheme should be in a situation where they can actually now fund that.
That's such a good point that you mentioned, and it's actually one that I have honestly forgotten about, but that provision of the minister is a transitional provision. So there comes a time that it is no longer applicable. So for those schemes that don't have maintenance, repair, and replacement plans, you best reach out to Philip and Yanni quick to get those plans in place.
Yeah, so I saw there was a question, the contractors, the engineering guys that we in Confiance and in Stratafin actually that assist us. We make use of one of the partners of the Let's Get Physical grouping, and that is NABA. So if you just Google or go onto our website and you will see the Let's Get Physical stuff, you'll get NABA's details. Otherwise, more than welcome to contact the office. And then our electrical guys, we use Hein Bredenkamp, who was the head of the Merafong municipality, the legal department, until he retired. He was there for over 30 years. So we use Hein, and he's situated in the Stratafin offices with Confiance, and we use him for all our municipal things. So he's not one of those guys that charge a percentage. He charges a professional fee. He's got an LLB degree. Clever guy that has been in municipal services for many years. So he charges a professional fee and he quotes and then he does the work. But the work is done in a proper way. Realistic budgeting. So you and I had a long laugh about this. We've seen many schemes that people don't want to increase budgets. Like you said, everything goes up. So there's no basis to say, well, we're just going to keep it the way it is. We're trying to make it livable for people. All you're doing at the end of the day is you're destroying the value because you're not maintaining the property. So you're destroying the capital value of your investment. And people must realize that. So one can't just do a minimum budget. So we make use of a zero-based budget system. So what we do is we go back on a monthly basis, on a yearly basis when we do the budget, and we say what are the requirements of the scheme. Then determine the requirements and then go and cost those and get quotations on all of the services. So you start at zero and you build up your budget from there. We see that people say, oh, municipality, we think they're going to increase by 10%, so we'll increase our budget by 8%. Hopefully that will be enough. And that's what they do. So it's just a random percentage that they want to increase. But if you follow the zero-based budget formula, then you actually have all your expenses there. Yes, you can go back to your previous years and say, what are those expenses that we've used or that we've had as a scheme? But you need to go and cost them properly on a year-by-year basis. I mean, you were telling me what you were doing when people wanted to just argue about the percentage increase. So maybe that's a valid point that you need to raise as well.
So we often get the instruction, and Willie, you mentioned you went to a meeting for one of my clients based in Johannesburg. There was a need to have a physical attendance at a meeting, so we asked you to attend. And you know, it's something that we very often get asked to do, both remotely and physically. But when it comes to the budget, it's always the item that I expect the most conversation to happen, you know, the most engagement, the most questions. The majority of managing agents we work with also ask owners to send through any comments or questions that they might have in regards to the budget before the AGM, that the trustees can prep and they can get all the information and all those fun things. But very often the members have the budget, the proposed budget, and everything that goes with it, 14 days or sometimes 30 days, depending on whether or not there's special business or not. And at the meeting, the only thing that is raised to the trustees is, go back and let me pay less. I want to pay less of a levy. And, you know, the stroppy trustees, which I prefer, will be like, well, what do you want us not to pay? What shall we take away? You mentioned during the meeting that security is important to you, so we'll keep security there. You know, we have to pay our municipal accounts. What shall we not pay? And unfortunately, that's how thin the margins is in a body corporate budget, that you're going to have to take away one of the expenses. And unfortunately, and I've had this experience, that most often it's the legal fees that's taken away, which we've pointed out now really shouldn't be. It is the things that should be done by external contractors that's done in-house or not done. It is certain service providers' annual increases that is not taken into consideration or reduced or not given. I know the managing agents very often are very, you know, they sweat bullets when it comes to the time of proposing their management fee increase, because it's always the first thing to go on a budget. But the question really is, you know, why don't you work with us as members and help us to amend this budget, help us to reach a situation of having a lower increase or savings elsewhere and all those fun things. And I often suggest that there be a directive to the incoming trustees to go and look at the budget again, but that the members actually participate in that process. And I suggest that there be a subcommittee or something like that. And I must say that every single time that I've suggested that a subcommittee be formed to assist with the budget, nobody participates. The people that are the most loud at the meeting asking for things to be taken from the budget or the percentage to be brought down, they will not raise their hand to participate in that. You know, it's, oh no, the trustees must go. Do you not think that the trustees would have come to you with a lower budget or a lower increase had it have been possible? They are bringing to you what they believe is the best for the body corporates, at least in most instances, but simply taking costs out of the budget is not going to help the body corporates. And when that all gets explained to the members at the meeting, I've got 100% track record where the budget does get approved as it is. Owners don't like it, but unfortunately, you know, what debtor is going to be taken out of the hat that month? What are you not going to pay for?
Absolutely. So I follow the same methodology. When I attend meetings, I say, right, let's start. Let's see what we can take out. And I start with the municipal services. Can we take the electricity out? Can we take the water out? No. Can we take the security out?
So why can't we stop paying?
So I do that. So I follow the same methodology. That is how you do it. And then the other thing is also they have to include like a contingency item to make sure that that unforeseen expense can be paid. Just regarding unforeseen expenses and budgets and so forth. And trustees are authorized by owners in respect of a budget to expend the amount of money in the budget. So this is also a question that I fairly often get is, but the trustees now want to spend more on this specific item than what the budget allows them. So therefore they are now acting outside of the budget, and they acting not in an appropriate manner and so forth. Very difficult, I mean, to budget, say, for example, municipal accounts, and you've got your water and electricity account there, and you've budgeted for 100,000, but now it was not 100, it was 110 on average over the 12 months, and come month 11 and you've actually expended all the money. Must you now say, well, we've exceeded that, so we can't pay, so we've exceeded our budget line item, and we're not going to pay, and the water and lights are going to be disconnected. So I know that the academic answer is that they can't spend more than what was budgeted. But I've always had the view that they can't spend more than what the budget allows them to spend in general. It's a budget. So if you then, I mean, in our business, when we look at budgets and we look at marketing, and we're now exceeding our marketing, then we go and we say, well, is there somewhere where we can save a little bit so that we can place that onto marketing, or whatever the situation is? So the trustees must then firstly go and have a look at their budget and say, all right, what have we spent? Okay, we haven't spent on maintenance as much as we thought, on X, Y, and Z that we thought, so we can actually allocate that. But it is important to have open and transparent communication, and we'll see that later on. It is important, and that's part of the stuff that needs to happen, is open and transparent communication, and to let members know what is going on. But it's important that trustees can actually have a bit of flexibility, and if there is a contingent liability, then it is easier to have a bit of flexibility, because that is then utilized in respect of that.
Yeah, we've got, I know it says Marion, but it's her husband that is commenting there about the directive or the restriction that's placed on trustees. My opinion will never ever change. The most important item on a SGM or AGM agenda is directives and restrictions. And it's an item that is so often underutilized or not utilized at all. And we obviously as an external person can't make a proposal, but we can most certainly make a recommendation or a suggestion. And it would be that that restriction or requirement to come back to the owners, either as part of notification or at a meeting, on the budget as a whole. I mean, nobody's got the looking glass or whatever to see exactly what the situation is going to be at the end of the day, but it is the budget as a whole that we have to look at, and perhaps restrict or direct the trustees in regard to the budget as a whole, because we don't know, and that's the whole topic, is that there's a lot of expenses that are unforeseen. Willie, just for something for you to comment on, you've obviously got way more experience in it than I do. There's quite a few comments about the body corporate making a profit, the body corporate increasing the levies, and the reserves becoming higher and higher. And a question that comes off that is just where should the body corporate be investing the reserve funds? What should they be investing in? What is allowed or what is recommended?
So the rule says it has to be invested in a financial institution that is registered. I know that there are products coming onto the market. I'm aware of some products that are coming onto the market where it's going to actually cater for these type of things, where it will give a cash flow component to the body corporate so that they can make provision for emergencies, and where they would then get a higher interest rate or return on their money. So as long as it's a financial institution and it falls within your risk, so you know that if something happens that you can get access to it, a body corporate must look where they can get the most out of their funding. But it is definitely something that is being worked on by various different businesses in the industry to try and create a better income for bodies corporate, because we've also seen schemes that get very little on that money. And there are billions of rands lying in the bank accounts and in some instances they don't even get returns on that money, which is obviously not the right thing. So I can tell you that Avina, with whom Stratafin works closely, is busy developing such a product at the moment. So there will be a product coming to market in that respect.
Oh, fantastic.
The next thing that we need to have a look at, insurance coverage. Very important. I mean, there was a question, why would the body corporate be liable? Well, the end of the day, it is the scheme. The body corporate is liable for the whole scheme and the upkeep and maintenance of that whole scheme. And if it burns down, then they have to make sure that that person has its section again, and it has to be restored to the way it was. So that is the obligation of the scheme. In this instance, there was no negligence on the side of the owner. I think the negligence was on the side of the body corporate in respect of not repairing the common property, electricity, and so forth. And therefore, the scheme actually now have to sort this out, because this person needs to get their section back because it's burned down. So very important to make sure that your insurance risks are checked properly. I mean, the one that you and I were dealing with, where I went to the meeting, was specifically regarding retaining walls. So again, an insurance issue that the scheme has to look at, must make sure that those retaining walls are in place, because if something happens, they're not going to pay out, and that burden will then fall on the owners as such. So must make sure that those things take place. And make sure that if there's additional risks that you need to insure them. Get those permissions from the owners in terms of the rules, and insure them. What permission is required for those additional risks, Zerlinda?
Special resolution. And I must say that I've never, ever been to an annual general meeting where there's been a proposed special resolution for those additional insurance risks. It would be interesting, and I'm sure that Mike from Atcher has a YouTube video or a blog post or something about it. But I've never been to a meeting where there's been a proposed special resolution prior to the meeting for an additional risk. Have you?
I've not. I've seen it as general resolutions.
Yeah.
I mean, where owners say, okay, move the geysers into the insurance policy, move ABC into that, and so forth. But yeah, generally it was just general resolutions.
I'm popping it onto the chat. Has anyone dealt with this as a special resolution at a meeting before? I'm sure that Mike, if he was participating, would be able to give us an answer immediately. You mentioned the retaining wall one. I don't know if it's the heavy rain that we've had, or this time of year or something, but a heck of a lot of retaining wall issues have been coming up in our consulting practice. Mike has got a YouTube video on the topic of retaining walls. And of course, we have to look at, is it an exclusive use area? Is it part of the section? Is it common property? Is it subject to a lease? Is it a neighboring property? In other words, outside of the scheme, are we dealing with a body corporate? Are we dealing with an HAA? So there's so many things to take into consideration. Nicole from my offices says that she has dealt with it before for loss of rental income. So that was a special resolution that was proposed at a meeting to add that additional item to the insurance. Also a good one.
And that loss of rental, was it for owners, or was it where the scheme actually owned those sections?
I think, there we go, she says for owners.
For owners, sure. Wow.
Yeah, I think Mike told me years ago that it used to be a requirement that was always in policies, the loss of rental income. I know with everything that happened in Durban a couple of years ago, that loss of financial income for businesses and things like that was a very big thing as well. Nicole, you said it was for also like 2.6 million rand. So yeah, that was quite surprising to have that type of cover.
Sure. Okay. Wow.
Here's an interesting one that someone posted. They had it for solar panels on roofs. That's quite an interesting one. Very relevant as well, hey?
Very, very relevant. I mean, we were talking about that last year, the whole year. Eh?
Yeah. Go and check out all the previous webinars and blog posts. Yeah.
Plenty of them. Financial review.
After we spent all the money on our houses, hey, Willie, now touch wood.
Yeah, and now we don't need all of those solar panels at the moment anymore. Yeah. Okay, financial reviews, another way of making sure that you can pay those expenses.
Mm.
Review those financial statements regularly. Monthly management accounts, so important in every
On
business to
that
get your.
one, Willie, the same managing agent that I was chatting to, I said to her, I know in my previous position as a managing agent, all the portfolio managers had to send out monthly management packs. And I know that body corporate to body corporate, trustees to trustees have different requirements of what they want them to look like. I'm a very bad trustee that I reply back to my portfolio manager to say, is there anything that I should note or be concerned about? Whereas, every trustee should be in the position to, number one, receive the monthly management accounts, and number two, to go through them, understand them, and ask questions about them. And that it mustn't be at the annual general meeting with the rest of the owners that you open that account for the first time and sort of like get a surprise. You have to keep on track of it, that you're actually able to make some sort of movement if necessary.
Yeah, I do the same in business. I go to the financial director and I say, come sit me in the boardroom. Is there anything that I should know that's happening? Yeah. So yeah, it is difficult always to do all those things, especially for trustees where they have daytime jobs as well. So difficult, but it has to be done. Somebody needs to look at those things and make sure that you are expending in accordance with your budget, that the money is coming in, that things are running properly, that there is a bit of a surplus, that there is some additional funds to pay. And at the first sign of a problem, you actually need to start calling a meeting and say, guys, we have a problem. I believe that one should actually make all of this information available to owners. I have no problem that owners see all the information. I mean, in Confiance Administrative Solutions, we make available all the financial, the invoices, everything to owners the whole time. It's on the system. They can see it, open and transparent, because the moment that you're open and transparent, you don't have this thing that, oh, trustees are stealing money and trustees are doing things that are untoward and so forth. So all of that detracts from all the work that trustees actually do. And they must just care for their wickets, if I can call it like that. They must just watch out for their wickets the whole time.
There isn't a better saying. No,
yeah.
well, I use it as an example at annual general meetings to direct the trustees to make all of that information available to the owners on a monthly basis. Whether or not the owner is going to log into the We Connect You platform and go and have a look, or if they're going to open up the email and have a look or ask the questions, that information should be made available to them. Yesterday, again, I, on behalf of an owner that I had received written approval from, I asked the managing agent for certain financial records, and I was immediately sent the POPI manual and the PIA application form. And I thought to myself, but the STSMA is telling me that I am entitled to this information. It is not secret. There's nothing that should be redacted. It's there for everybody. And I'm getting it in a summarized version for the annual general meeting in any event. So why can't I drill down into the relevant specifications, bearing in mind that other than the financial statements, audited financial statements, there isn't actually a format that this all should be kept and managed in and provided to me. But the most short-sighted view is to not make the information available to the owners. Of course, you're going to get the owners that are going to send you 1,001 emails asking the most ridiculous questions about line items, but rather during the course of the year, as opposed to, at the annual general meeting when such important decisions have to be made.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, documentation, what we're talking about now. Keep those records, make them available.
Someone just asked, may owners have access to other owners' levy accounts? I'm big on the name and shame. I don't know what your view is.
So on sectional title living South Africa, I've said it many, many times. Section 10 of the Act says that an owner can institute action on behalf of the body corporate if the trustees are not doing what they're supposed to be doing. Now, if the body corporate is not suing an owner or not taking legal action against this particular owner, and we've seen that many, many times, that sometimes it's trustees that are not being pursued because they are in that position of authority in the scheme, and they're not paying their levies, and then nobody's doing something about them because they're the trustee, and they're too scared that if they now start doing something about that the management agreement will be cancelled. then an owner must have that information. How can an owner step into the shoes of the body corporate and do what Section 10 says they can do and get an order from court that I can now sue on behalf of the body corporate and recover this money on behalf of the body corporate if you don't know? So yes, you're entitled to all the information. It's your scheme. It's your body corporate. You must be able to see everything. That's my opinion. And I know that Veronica at Confiance doesn't share my opinion. She redacts all the documents and she takes the names out and so forth. But she does show that this is the amount that's owing and so forth. So different people have different views regarding that. But I think that open and transparency is, yeah, I don't know. Is it Section 9 or Section 10? I don't know. I think it's Section 10, but I'll send somebody to quickly get the act. Get the act for me.
I understand where Veronica's coming from, because she's dealing with schemes that are placed under administration, where very often, no matter what positive influence you have on the body corporate's management, there's going to be owners that don't want you there and are fighting with you the whole time and may use that information. I think of one body corporate specifically that when I referred them to you guys, everyone is very excited. But Veronica, every time I speak to her, she's like, "Oh, thank you so much for that scheme."
Sarcasm.
Yeah, that there's, no matter what information you provide to the owners, you're going to be faced with a challenge. I find, and anybody online can comment or disagree or agree, I find that very often when it comes to the debtors, what the members are wanting to know is how much of what is in arrears is sitting with what percentage of owners. So we want to hear that 90% of the arrear levies is actually only with 2 people or an estate late or something like that. We don't need to know that it's Zerlinda Van Der Merwe that owes X amount of money. We just want to know, is it one naughty owner? Is it one owner that's, in serious financial distress? Is it one owner that's been handed over? Is it one owner that's got an estate late? Or is it throughout the scheme that levies are just not being collected correctly, and we've got a serious problem here that we have to look at? Willie, there was also a good comment or a question on the chat for you, and part of what you do as a business offering of making loans to body corporate. I don't know if you want to deal with that one.
I didn't see the question. What was the one?
It says, if a complex takes a loan of 2 million rand to pay the service providers and do the complex maintenance due to the arrears of levies, and since the loan was taken, no monthly repayment was paid to the loan company, and now the loan is sitting at 4 million rand. We called an SGM to advise the owners that this amount needed to be paid, but the other owners advised that their levies are up to date. Only the arrears units must pay this loan amount. On the first SGM date, we did not have the quorum, and on the second date, we had a few owners, but not 75% of the members, and all the owners to pay. Some owners still don't want to pay this as their levy account is up to date. Sorry, only I use the swimming pool, therefore only I should pay. Is it that type of argument?
Loans, webinar on its own. Schemes should not be lent money if they can't repay it. First thing. We need to have the legislation changed. Body corporate must fall under the Credit Act, and schemes should not be lent money when it's reckless lending. That is just, it's normal people that don't necessarily understand finances, and they approve these loans, and schemes are then placed in a situation that they can't repay. All owners pay levies, and if the repayment of the loan is part of the budget, then all owners are paying for that. If it was not budgeted for, then obviously it needs to be budgeted for and it needs to be put in there. If the levy or if the levy company that lent the money to them actually take legal action against the body corporate, at the end of the day, they can recover from all owners, but only in as far as the person has not contributed can there be a attachment of that person's property. So if the person has actually paid the levies at that moment when attachment takes place, then they will be fine. So there won't be a problem against the guys that have actually paid it. But then it should have been in the budget and they have paid their budget. If it wasn't budgeted for, then it's not part of the budget. It is not something that they actually have paid, and they will still be held liable for that as well. So that is the situation in respect of that. So yeah, I think we were talking about the communication, regularly inform owners, let them know what's going on, ask the financial input. I mean, you were talking about the subcommittee. We've got it there as well. Subcommittee is always a great idea, but nobody wants to be on the financial subcommittee. So definitely stuff that needs to be taken into account. Okay. Audits, professional audits. Make sure that the audits are done by an independent auditor. Absolutely critical to make sure that the audits are done by an independent auditor. That scheme that you've referred to us, that Veronica is not so keen on, we employed independent auditors now. Last 3 years audits were done. What came out of that is just absolutely remarkable. PQs that were not done correctly, developer issues where the developer has not paid his levies, transfers that were affected from the developer after the scheme came into existence where levies were not paid properly. It's only the independent auditor that actually picked these things up. So all the internal auditing, all the other stuff that happened prior to us becoming involved in that scheme never showed those issues, and the independent auditor. So from a risk point of view, it's important to have that, to do that.
I know when we chat to Alistair at PKF Octagon, he always says, you know, the thing that gets him the most, or one of the things that get him the most, is that members very often ask, what is the auditor charging? And they want to go for the cheapest auditor, but going for the cheapest auditor isn't necessarily, you know, the best route to go for. You need to go through somebody that is not only going to look at the information that has been given to them and regurgitated reports, but rather the ones that are going to actually ask the questions and know what to ask. You know, it's not a simple matter of, this is our accounting system, this is our, you know, financial statements that we've prepared as the trustees or the body corporates. You need to go and have a look at your sectional plans and your rules and your minutes of meetings and who are bank signatories and trustee resolutions, and if there are trustee resolutions and member resolutions and proper prepared budgets and all of those fun things. It is not only a financial audit, but it's an audit of the affairs, the management and the administration of the body corporate that needs to be undertaken, and a liability that's attached to it as well. So it's not an easy decision.
Yeah, so you're mentioning Alistair, so he was the auditor in respect of this.
There we go. I didn't even know that. I just assumed. I was thinking, I wanted to say, I'm sure Alistair was the only one that was able to assist there.
Yeah, no,
dear.
definitely. So definitely. Yeah. And then one needs to implement those recommendations, because he's not going to also just write recommendations that he's just regurgitating out of something that somebody has written 10 years ago or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah.
So definitely well worth the money spent in respect of proper independent auditors.
Yeah.
Continual improvement. Look at your budget, look at the scheme, look at all the strategies that you are following. Try and think up ways to make sure that those strategies are working. I mean, I saw the question about, can people that are not paying their levies be reported? Definitely. It's a payment that has to be made, and if it's not made, you can report them, you can put it onto the credit bureau. It definitely creates a situation that they pay. We see that where we've taken judgment against these guys and it's reported on the credit bureau, and they want to buy the new car in December when they got the bonus, they come back and they come and make the arrangement to make the payment, and payments are forthcoming because they can't do anything with that adverse credit rating that they have as a result of the judgment or the reporting and so forth. And then update the risk assessment and the funding plans in accordance with what you're finding, your reviews. But go back to owners, discuss it with owners, get owner input. Important that schemes actually have this interaction with owners, that owners are aware what's going on. Zerlinda, anything that you want to add here?
I was thinking about our little name dropping of all of the colleagues in the industry, and luckily there were 1 or 2 questions about who are these people, give us their contact details. But and I know that you all attest to it as well. We don't have this like closed group of, oh, if you're going to use an auditor, only use XYZ, or if you're only going to use an engineer, only use X, Y, and Z. But the colleagues that we have been really, honored and privileged to work with have shown us how things must be done. And through that connection and through that working together and shared resources and all of those fun things, I think that it is a benefit to the industry as a whole. And, that list is constantly growing and constantly being added to, but it's colleagues that will agree with this advice that is being given, or with the questions that are being asked. One of the last things you said now was the blacklisting, and earlier on in the webinar, there were a couple of people that asked, what is the advice on blacklisting? Is it something that can be done? And I actually recommended Dylan from your guys' offices from DTB, and Nicole wrote an article about blacklisting as well. And I think and you need to correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it's something that is probably quite easy to do, but is quite underutilized as well. I mean, would you maybe be able to take us through the process of blacklisting, or if you recommend it?
So we do that. We definitely go to the credit bureau and give an adverse on a monthly basis. When I was a managing agent and I ran an agency, we also did that. So on a monthly basis, we have placed that the levy defaulters as part of the credit policy of the scheme onto the relevant credit bureau. And from there, it goes to all the different credit bureaus, and owners then are aware. This specific credit bureau, and we'll give all the details afterwards. I mean, I see that people are asking who these people are that we're speaking about and so forth. So we'll give these details through at a later stage when we send this out. But we have done so, and they sent out SMSs, and they tell people that you will have a adverse on your credit record if you don't start paying. So definitely it does help, and it's definitely a way of making sure that you do get your money in. I think we still have another 2 or 3 slides. Let me just, okay, financial products. So here's my chance to sell.
Go.
So Stratafin, we actually have a 4th product as well that I didn't put in there, and that is our litigation loan product that we started very recently. So we've got the debt purchase model where we're buying the book of the body corporate. We outright purchase that book, and we do it on a time value of money basis. So we give you a net amount. So it's not a loan like the one that the scheme took, and many years later they now owe double and they haven't paid it and so forth. We will go and assess your levy book. We will then say, this is what this is the amount, this is what we are prepared to pay for that. That money then gets paid over to the scheme. It's not a loan. They get that money, they use it, they don't have to repay us, and we will then pursue those debtors at our time and our cost, and recover the money from those debtors in that way. Then there's a term loan, so we do term loans as well, but we definitely work under the Credit Act. Even though the transaction does not fall under the Credit Act, we will still apply the rules of the Credit Act. We won't do loans to schemes where we see that the scheme can't afford it. We don't want to put a scheme in a worse position than what it was. We would then rather look at a debt purchase. We would look at a raising of a special levy to see what they can do regarding a special levy. If they require the funding immediately, we will check that they pay that special levy for a 3-month or 4-month period, that the funds are coming in before we will actually lend the money. And then we have a hybrid solution where we use both those products together to give sufficient money for schemes that require that. And then the litigation loan that we recently started. So what we do is we lend a scheme the money on a party and party scale, so about 45,000 Rand from start to finish. We lend that to the scheme at the 2% interest rate that the debtor pays on the debt. The scheme pays that over a 3-year period, and we will then refer the collection to one of our panel attorneys that we monitor that they do the collection like they do our collections as well, and the scheme gets monthly reports in that regard. And what they then at the end get is they get their collection, the full amount that was outstanding. They get the legal fee. We can't say it will be exactly the same because the loan is for 45,000 rand, and the party fee varies from 42 to 47,000 rand. So that's why we decided that we use the middle ground of 45. And they also get the interest because the debtor is then liable out of the debt or out of the judgment in respect of that. So that's also stuff that schemes can look at, but these are last resorts. These are not the go-tos. You don't go there unless you have a problem and the problem can't be resolved in any other way. And schemes must rather work to sort out their problems in other ways before they get to this. In respect of our debt purchase model, we only look at debts over 50,000 rand, so not small debts, because we have found that those they're never going to pay. There's about 1% of guys that pay after the debt is past 50,000 rand. So very, very slow paying where the debt has reached that level. And secondly, we can't get execution on the immovable property if the debt is not large enough, and the courts are happy when we go to court with 50,000 rand to recover that, and we will be able to sell the property in execution and get a new owner into the scheme that then pays the levies. So that's just on the financial products available from Stratafin. There are other products available as well, but one must be very careful to not fall in a debt trap. I've got a video out there on the YouTube channel about the debt trap. It's important that people know what the debt trap is, where they get money, where the debtors are going to be used to repay the loan amount, and that the paying owners pay an interest until such a time as the debt is being recovered. And the person that's lent you the money is giving you or is responsible for the collection, so they're never going to collect, so you're going to pay interest for the rest of your life. So that just creates a trap for a scheme. And there are various forms of it that we see, but schemes will be very careful to utilize those. Next page. Directives, we already touched it, but let's just deal with it.
Yeah, definitely. I think going into a meeting, having really thought about what you're happy with and not happy with in the body corporate, understanding what trustees are allowed to do, not allowed to do, and then, thinking the directive and restriction through. I was at an AGM yesterday where another owner on behalf of a proxy proposed a directive, but the wording of it didn't make sense. And because they didn't have further instructions, we couldn't take the restriction on board. So it's very important to understand exactly what you're wanting to achieve before you make a proposal as a directive and a restriction. But it's super, super, super important item on an agenda.
Yeah, I think people sometimes just throw these restrictions up there. Trustees are not allowed to pay more than 10,000 rand on a specific expense. And then they don't even know that their municipal account is 200,000 in a month. So must the trustees now stop the scheme and not pay it? Or
yeah, exactly.
It's absolutely something that needs to be considered properly and not just
properly. Yeah,
proposed, but not willy-nilly just put on there.
Yeah, and minuted properly as well, because very often we deal with disputes where we're trying to assist either a body corporate and an owner, and if it's not minuted properly exactly what was proposed and agreed upon, and we've got two different blog posts, one that was written by a managing agent colleague and one of ourselves about whether or not directives and restrictions require a vote at an AGM or an SGM as well. So that's something interesting to go and have a look at, but it's super important to use the item properly.
And then if they don't follow, what do you do? How do you enforce this?
Well, it's a breach of the statutory duty of the trustee. They've breached their fiduciary duty to the body corporate. So you've got a claim against the individual trustees. They have not conducted themselves as trustees should. It's additional powers that are given or powers that are restricted or regulated. So it's quite a serious offense, for lack of a better word.
But you can also go to CSOS and you can and force trustees to comply with that as well,
100%,
right?
100%, yeah.
Yeah. I just saw that there was also a question about properties going on auction. So just general, I mean, people that come to the Let's Get Physicals and so forth would have heard this before, but one can never collect more than what is the value of the property in respect of outstanding levies. So nobody will pay more on outstanding levies than what the property is worth. When you purchase a property at an auction, you are liable to pay the outstanding levies to the scheme in terms of Section 15 and in terms of the rules of the auction. And nobody's going to pay 300,000 rands worth of levies on a unit in a scheme that's worth 250,000 rand. So that unit will not sell. If the bond outstanding on the property and the levy exceed the value, you will also not be successful in your sale, because then the person will have to pay the minimum bid, which is the 250,000 rand, that's the bond, and they must pay the 150,000 rand in respect of the levies. So therefore, you're already at 400,000 rand. The property is only worth 250,000 rand, so there's not going to be a sale. So what needs to happen is you need to have attorneys that understand the process, that understands how to do this, and then approach the court again, and eventually that property can be sold without the bond. So it is a process that needs to be followed, and most attorneys don't know how to do it. DTB, Dylan, and his team, Marilisa and her team, I mean, they do this on a daily basis. This is the stuff that they do. And those properties do get sold in execution. But there's also the hijacking of properties at auction. So lots of buyers are not real buyers at auction. So they purchase the property, they pay a 10% deposit in respect of the purchase price, and they then have access to that property in terms of the rules of the auction. And they then rent it out. It takes about a year to have that sale cancelled. In the interim, they've collected rent for a year that exceeds the 10% that they've paid as a deposit, and they walk away from the money that was paid at the sheriff. And that's their business model. So we've got syndicates working in the industry that actually does this at auctions. So one needs to understand these things. You need to understand what's happening. You need to understand how to act and how to stop this from happening. So therefore it's not all attorneys that do collections that understand how these things work and what happens in the industry. And one must make sure that you get hold of those guys that actually understand what happens. So I don't want to punt just all the legal firms here, but there are some firms that understand and actually get those things through, and there are firms that we have seen that have charged hundreds of thousands of rands in respect of matters, and they will never get to finality. They're never going to get that property sold. So yeah, that's just regarding the questions that I saw there. I don't know if there was anything else, but we're already over time, 5 minutes. Hey, so I think we should wrap it up, Zerlinda.
I think it was a good topic, Willie. So well done. Thank you so much.
Well done for you for the topic. It was your suggestion. So thank you for the topic.
Nicole, I know awesome. Nicole's still online. Well done, Nicole.
Well done, Nicole.
Thank you so much, Willie. I really, really appreciate you inviting us to the webinar, and thank you for everyone that attended. I see you almost went up to 200 attendees at one point, which is really, really great. And then a lot of people asked about whether or not it was going to be recorded, and I know Lauren will get it online ASAP. So thank you so much.
Is recorded. It will go onto the YouTube channel. We will send out an email once it's on there, and we will also then include the list of all the people that forms part of the Let's Get Physical grouping, with whom we actually all work close together. I mean, we are various people in the same industry that does the same services, and we all work together. So we're not, Zerlinda, this is what you do, and Willie, that's what you do. We actually all work together and we assist each other, because we all have the same ethos and the same mentality and the same drive to make schemes better in South Africa.
100%. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Zerlinda.
Cool. Keep well, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thanks, guys.